Well, as you know, the past few weeks we've been talking about what on earth is about to happen, for heaven's sake. What's going on in the world today, we ask. What's going to happen next? How and when will the world end? And what should we do? Well, we have arrived. We've arrived at the 70th week of Daniel, right here. Remember, a couple weeks ago we went through this whole timeline and figured out that we're to this point here during the church age, and we talked about the 70 weeks of Daniel, each week being 7 years, and went over some of that last week. So the 70th week of Daniel, which is the final week or 7-year period, is remaining. It's yet to come from the prophecy about the future that was delivered to Daniel by the angel Gabriel in response to his prayer that we looked at last week. And as we learned last week, the first 69 weeks, or 483 years, were completed and fulfilled when Jesus was rejected as king in Jerusalem and killed. The Messiah was cut off, as he said would happen. And God then set Daniel's people aside, the Jews, in order to graft in the Gentiles, the wild olive branch, who became the church for the next 2,000 years. And so, here we are, watching and waiting for that final week to commence, so that we can count down the final days until the Lord Jesus returns in the clouds on the day of Christ. Now, we talked about the treaty with Israel that will allow the Jews to rebuild their temple. And when that happens, we can start the clock and the countdown through those final 7 years. Now, halfway through that time, in the midst of the week, the leader who made the treaty will break the treaty, and desolate the temple. And the Jews will then realize that this is not the Messiah, and Christians will know he is the Antichrist, or the man of sin. Now, first of all, the day of Christ is the day when Christ returns, when he comes in the clouds. Most modern Bible translations call this the day of the Lord, but I think that's incorrect. See, the King James Bible appears to be right. It distinguishes between the day of Christ and the day of the Lord, that they're two separate, different things. The day of the Lord refers to Christ's 1,000-year millennial reign here on earth. The day of the Lord. That's when he's reigning here on earth. Now, the day of Christ must come first, along with many other events that we'll discuss as we work our way through these prophecies. The Apostle Paul said in 2 Thessalonians 2:3, that day, the day of Christ, cannot come until two things happen. One, a falling away, and two, the man of sin be revealed. And I believe that during these first 3.5 years of the final 7, there will be a great falling away. People will stop serving God, by the millions perhaps. We'll get into that later, probably next time. And then halfway through this 7-year time period, the man of sin is going to desolate the temple. So let's look ahead a little bit to Daniel chapter 8, verse 10, where it's talking about the little horn Antichrist that we just heard about in Daniel chapter 7. In chapter 8 it says, "And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So this is talking about breaking the treaty by stopping the daily sacrifices that the Jews will be performing in their temple. And then he'll commandeer his temple, their temple, and desecrate it, or desolate it, as it says. Here's where he will desolate the temple, and I'm not sure how he'll do that. Perhaps it'll be some unclean sacrifice, or maybe he'll erect some sort of idol to himself, or some such thing. But verse 13 then says, Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days. Well, there's a clue. 2,300 days. That's almost 6.5 years. And then the sanctuary shall be cleansed, says the angel. So, this desolation will happen halfway through, and it will last 2,300 days, which is this red arrow here. The temple is desolate for 2,300 days. And then it will be cleansed. See, when Jesus came to Jerusalem at the beginning of his ministry, you'll remember, he went to the temple and cleaned it out. And near the end of his ministry, he came back and cleaned it out again. He went in with a whip and drove out the money changers from the temple. And twice he did that. And he's going to do that again. So when Jesus returns, he will go and cleanse the temple, and the desolation will stop. So I want to go back then to chapter 7 that we read today to pick up another prophecy. Back to verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea. Most Bible scholars think that this great sea represents the sea of humanity. In fact, that's where the term comes from. And I see no reason to disagree. So the four winds will strive to see who will be in control of humanity. Verse 3. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Well, think about this. At the end of time, which is probably now or very soon, there will be four world kingdoms or empires that come up. The first one is a lion with eagle's wings. Well, that is very likely an alliance between England and America, or UK and USA. As you know, England's symbol has historically been a lion, usually a standing lion, as it mentions. And America's symbol has traditionally been an eagle. And it says that the eagle's wings were plucked and the lion stood up as a man. The United States could lose our financial dominance in this world any time, really. We're so deep in debt that our economy could crash at any time, and our Federal Reserve notes could become worthless. You know, they're really based on nothing but debt as it is, and we're $21 trillion in debt, so we could be ripe for the plucking, as it says here. Verse 5 says, "And behold another beast, a second like to a bear. And it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh." Well, this second beast is likely Russia. Their symbol is a bear. And the 3 ribs in its teeth could be 3 nearby countries that it devours, which is something that Russia the bear has been known for years, devouring its neighbors. Verse 6, "After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it." This beast could be an alliance of Eastern nations, perhaps, like China, Japan, Korea, perhaps Indonesia or India. 4 such great nations might get together and become a world power. It's just a guess, but it certainly seems possible. Verse 7, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly." Well, this 4th beast is critical. It is not described like the others as looking like other animals, just that it is dreadful, terrible, exceedingly strong beast. And it had great iron teeth, it says, and devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So this one is different from anything else. What is this 4th beast with iron teeth that stamps on everything? Well, it could be a Muslim alliance in the end of time, getting together now. Now, we talked about the Ottoman Empire earlier, which was dismantled after World War I, following 1,200 years of domination in that region. Well, they've been very angry about that, and they're attempting to reform through their caliphate, which is the Nation of Islam, as you hear. If they haven't done it already, they're working on it. And the beast has 10 horns, it says. So it could be an alliance of 10 Muslim nations around and near Israel. There are at least 10 of them there. Verse 8 says, "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn." Well, this little horn is a key here. It's Antichrist. The little horn will be mentioned again and again in upcoming passages, keeps coming up. He may be the ruler of one of the Muslim nations, we'll see. "But the little horn before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down." So it sounds like this little horn leader will conquer or take over 3 other countries in the alliance and rise to power. "And the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire." Well, this, of course, is speaking about God himself, the Ancient of Days. Verse 10, "A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened." 10,000 times 10,000. That's 100 million. And it's a phrase and a number that'll come up again. like in Revelation 5, it says, "Then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000. Now this probably refers to 100 million people who will be martyred, very likely by beheading, as it talks about in Revelation. But we'll get into that later when we look further into Revelation. But back to Daniel 7, where it says, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. Well, this would be the final judgment, which we also read about in Revelation 20. The books will be opened, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. So everything that you said, done, and thought will be brought up again and judged. Sort of a scary thought, huh? Verse 11 says, I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven. Coming in the clouds, we've heard that before in our study of 1 Thessalonians during Advent, and we'll hear it several more times. So it says, the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven and came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. Now Daniel is intrigued, so he asks, tell me more about this fourth beast. Verse 15 says, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me known the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. So the fourth beast, the fourth king, the Antichrist, aka the little horn, comes and sets up his kingdom. Then the Lord will come and set up his kingdom. Sounds simple. But when we read further, we find that there's a gap in between. And I've read through this part of Daniel several times, and I've always wondered what on earth is going on here. But then when I read through this book by Dr. Kent Hovind, What on Earth is About to Happen, I finally realized that Daniel is telling the same story 4 times, adding new details each time. And Dr. Hovind says it's like doing a paint job, adding coat after coat of paint to give it depth and dimension. So Daniel 7 seems to be giving us 4 coats of paint, 4 passes over the same events, adding new details each time. Verse 19 says, Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows, I beheld. And the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them. Wait a minute. I thought the Lord sets up his kingdom. Well, he will, after this beast prevails against the saints. And this is one strong clue that indicates that we'll be here during the tribulation time. And there are more indications to come. Verse 22 says, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Well, earlier in verses 15 through 18, we heard about the fourth beast, and then the saints possess the kingdom. Here we have the fourth beast, and the saints possess the kingdom. After they get beat up, he prevails against them. Now we'll read the same story again. Another coat of paint, starting with verse 23. It says, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. And another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. Well, change times and laws. You know, I think that the Muslims would change time to their calendar once they took over. And their Sharia law is certainly different than most countries' laws, and they keep saying they want to institute that everywhere. Then it says, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. They shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Well, here we have a reference to the 3.5 years that we talked about earlier, and that we hear about in Revelation. Time, times, and the dividing of time. Time being a year, times another 2 years. The dividing of time would be another half year, so 3.5 years. So the saints will be given into his hand to be persecuted for 3.5 years. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. So Antichrist has his plans. He's going to beat up the saints. But God will come set up his kingdom anyway. So we will have the victory in the end, don't worry. All right? Verse 27 says, and the kingdom and dominion, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So the kingdom will be given to the saints by the Most High. That's another coat of paint, with a little more emphasis to make sure we get the story. And then 28 says, hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. So Daniel chapter 7 is telling us that there will come a time when these 4 beasts fight. One of them will rise to prominence, very possibly the Muslim Empire, and they will take control, persecute the saints. Then God will come and set up his kingdom. And it seems to tie back to Daniel chapter 2, where there are the 10 kings, 10 toes on feet of iron and clay that will not mix. And during the time of these kings, that stone which is cut out of the mountain without hands will come and smite the image on the feet and crumble the whole thing, the cornerstone that was rejected, Christ. The stone will grow to become a great mountain, and that's the kingdom of God. It's the same story told over and over again in symbolism. And there will be a world empire that will make a treaty, most likely with Israel. But they will break that treaty and desolate the temple. During the time of desolation and before, many will fall away from the faith. Again, Paul says in 2 Thessalonians that the day of Christ cannot come until two things happen. One, there's a great falling away, and two, the man of sin is revealed. And Jesus asked a question in Luke 18:8, which was never answered. He said, "When the Son of Man comes, shall he find faith on the earth?" Well, we'll talk more about that next time. Probably in 2 weeks. The message will be called Falling Away. Amen? In Jesus' name. Amen.